Okay, looks like we are here. So, hopefully people got the memo that we're starting a little later today. To start, one of you guys wanted me to address something, so I'm going to talk about that first, because they're not going to be able to attend the live stream. So I have to go to my comments. And let's see. Okay, so Liang Shu, I have no idea how to pronounce your name, sorry. But Liang, in a recent comment, was asking some questions. The first question he asked, I assume he, was, is the TH in with voiced or voiceless? And by default, it's voiceless. But we do often change it into a voiced TH, especially if the next sound is voiced. It doesn't really matter. Either way is fine. And let's see. More importantly, he was asking about how to differentiate the pronunciation of tall and towel. Now, there's a special trick here, and we're going to talk about that too. He says, that's loud, sorry, motorcycle outside. One moment while the motorcycle passes. Okay, so he also says, I know the vowel of tall is ah, the fifth vowel on the vowel chart. Perfect. And towel is ow, the diphthong. Perfect. But I cannot tell the difference when I hear them, and I cannot make them differently. So I cannot pronounce them differently when I say them. It might be an L-colored thing I did not get yet. So let's talk about these details. So we have tall, we have towel. Now tall, so you're absolutely correct. This is an L-colored thing, so it's not going to sound exactly like the fifth vowel normally. It's not going to be ta, right? It's going to be tall, tall. So we have the L-colored fifth vowel. And again, for people who don't know, the fifth vowel, I'm referring to the fifth vowel on my vowel chart, which you can download in the description by following the link to the download section of my website. It's 3 a.m. but worth it. Hello, unknown. How are you? Glad that you could join us at 3 a.m. I'm answering a question for somebody who cannot be here, so I'm trying to get this done at the start so that they can have their answer when they watch this later. But so that's tall, okay? L-colored ah. Now for towel, the full clear enunciated word for towel. Hello, Gabriel. 9 p.m. Yeah, so 4 p.m. here, so you're only a little ahead. Towel, towel. So we have ow, and then we're going into ul. Now you can describe that L at the end as sort of as a syllabic L or as a half L, what I call a half L, a dark L that most teachers call it. Or you could say there's sort of like a little schwa and an L there. It doesn't really matter how you describe it. But we kind of get a bit of an L color on the ow. Towel, towel. Okay. And you can break it sort of into 2 syllables. Towel. That's okay. Doesn't really matter. But you can blend it as well. Now, there's actually an easier way to say this. Hello, Shun Shun. I'm glad you could join us. There is an easier way to say towel, which usually when you have OWEL, so where it's the ow diphthong plus ul at the end, like towel, vowel, even growl, spelled differently, but it's the same idea, growl. What we'll often do is we'll actually change the vowel. Okay, we'll reduce it and we'll say towel, thou, growl. And so it actually turns into an L-colored fourth vowel sound on the vowel chart, ah, like in cat, but with the L, owl, okay? So if it's easier for you to say owl instead of owl, then do that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a very common pronunciation. And yeah, it works just fine. So if you want to use the full pronunciation of owl or owl, owl, where you kind of blend it, it can be very tricky, and you might want to make sure that you're hitting the ow diphthong first, and then you can hit the ol by itself, and then kind of try to put them together. Same thing with ah and ol. So you break things into pieces, you try to put them together, and then you go from there to differentiate sounds that are similar. I hope that answers your question, Liang. And if not, you can leave another comment and hopefully I can clarify. But that will answer Liang's question. And let's move on. Okay, do we do the thing we do? That sounds so funny. Do we do the thing we do with mountain, curtain, etc., also with garden? No. No, we don't say garden, garden. No, it's not going to work. See, I'm in the garden, garden. We can do something similar, but it's not the same. When we say mountain, we talked a bit about this word before as well. The most common default way to say this, you have a glottal stop T, and then you do a syllabic N. There's some variation, but mountain, mountain. Okay, same thing, curtain, curtain, curtain. With garden, number one, it's a D sound. So if anything, you would have to make it a glottal stop D if we were to do the same thing. Garden, garden. What we do here instead is we don't do the glottal stop, right? We don't say garden, garden. See, that's even hard to say. But what we will do commonly, instead of releasing the D, we'll stop the D in the mouth. So it's a normal stop, not a glottal stop. I guess you could describe it that way. It's kind of like, or a held D, whatever, it doesn't matter. And this would be one of the very rare cases where there actually is sort of a difference between the held and the glottal. Usually there's not, the difference is just a matter of clarity, which I'm going to talk about more later. So if you go from gar into the D position, but you don't push the D out and you just make it an N, garden, gar. Now you can't just say garn, because if you just do this, that's not right. Okay. If you listen very carefully, I don't know if you can hear it in this mic, but garden, garden. What I'm doing there is I'm going into the D, and then before I just do a straight N, the back of my tongue kind of comes up and closes while my tongue is here, and then it releases to let that N go. So it's kind of like trying to say an N that you then block in the back of your throat for like a quick second. You're not trying to hold it. It's not a glottal stop necessarily, but you block the back of your throat while keeping the same position for N. And then you release that, and it's like trying to do like two N's one after the other without actually releasing the position. Garden, garden. And you'll hear this little in the nose. Garden, garden, garden. And if we say quickly garden, garden, that sound kind of gets smaller and it doesn't become so obvious. But I'm in the garden, garden, garden. I listen to the word garden like hundreds of times from Youglish, and I'm physically unable to say it. That can happen, yeah. So the full, clearly enunciated version of the word is garden, right? And that last vowel could probably also be a schwa. I say it with the second vowel, like it. Again, second vowel refers to the vowel on the vowel chart. So it would sound like in or din. It's like gar-din. And if you want to say it that way because it's easier, it's not that big of a deal. Obviously, we have another way to say it, but if you say it this way, it's this particular word isn't going to stand out too much. Like I'm in the garden, garden. It's not that big of a deal. Hello, David. Good to see you. Glad you can make it this week. I'm just answering a question about the word garden. So if you want to master that sort of like complete naturalness, then you got to keep practicing. You got to practice that transition, like I described. But the great thing about learning pronunciation is that there are some things, like if you want to sound 100% perfect, 100% natural, like a native in every aspect, then there are things that you're going to have to master that might take you a while or be very difficult to do. Um, but the great thing is that maybe you want to sound pretty much like a native, but maybe there's a couple really, really difficult things that don't cause a big problem in understanding you, and you're just like, it's not worth the effort. Especially if it's for like one word or one kind of word. You can make the choice to kind of say, whatever. This is definitely one of those words where you can kind of just say that D normally and it's going to sound just fine. There's no problem. So, why do some people say garden with a really open vowel on the second syllable? Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about. So the more natural, faster, common way to say it would be garden, where it's like a syllabic N. But the clearly enunciated full pronunciation of the word is garden, garden. Um, I believe it can also be a schwa, garden, which is a little weird to me, but usually it is because I tend to do the second vowel in places where middle of the country general American would use more of a schwa sound. But if they're saying something like gardon or something like that, that's definitely not right. So that if it's that open, that's not right. But garden um, is perfectly acceptable. So I don't know if you've heard people say it more open than that, like the third vowel or the fourth vowel. If so, then it might be a dialect or a regional thing. Um, Hello, Sedent. How long since you started? 13 minutes now. Well, according to YouTube, 12 minutes. I guess I started a minute late. Um, yeah, the live stream was originally supposed to be at 10 a.m. my time, which was like what 4, 5, 6 hours ago, something like that. But I forgot what time my dentist appointment was today, and so I scheduled this for 10, and my dentist appointment was at 10, so I had to move this to later in the day. Um, so unknown says, just like I gave up on the th as in the, I just say D. Well, that is a point that is kind of special. Um, don't say a regular D, like an English D. If you say a dental D, it's acceptable. There's not really a problem with that. In most cases, there's some cases where it's going to sound kind of weird. But 99% of the time, if you just do a dental D for the voiced TH or a dental T for the voiceless TH, it's going to sound perfectly natural. Do not do a non-dental D, right? If you say duh, like this, right, or D if it's the instead, that is going to sound not only bad, but it's going to sound very uneducated. Um, so there are some details that you don't want to give up on because you're going to have a negative impact from it, whether it's not being clearly understood or maybe sounding uneducated in some way. And guys, there are some sounds that are different than your language. Yes, some sounds that are difficult. Okay, usually the fourth vowel a, the second vowel e, the schwa sound, the high schwa like book, the and the r colored vowels. Okay, those are usually the difficult vowels. So it's like half the vowels. It's okay. Then the th consonant, um, sometimes the v and the w consonants. Th is hard for almost all English learners, but there's a couple other consonants here or there, depending on your native language, that will also be difficult. And you can get them. Okay, you can get them with consistency, the right feedback, the right practice. Again, I have a Patreon where you do have the opportunity to, send me some recordings here and there, um, and whatnot. So, yeah, it is possible. It is possible. I can almost guarantee you it is possible. I've had some students that with particular sounds like the schwa sound, where we worked on it. For example, I was seeing one student 3 days a week, and we were focused almost completely on the schwa sound. Like we spent more than half of every hour with every class just trying to find the schwa sound and be able to produce it. And it took us about 3 weeks of 3 classes a week of at least half the class. And then, of course, they're trying to practice outside of class as well. I don't know how much they were practicing outside of class. That might have been a factor, but it took us about 3 weeks. But this person did actually start to get the schwa sound. Okay. Just like me rolling my R's in Spanish. I still can't do them perfectly because I never took the time to actually master it. But um, when I first started speaking Spanish, I could tap an R. I could ra, ra, because it's very similar to the Japanese R. So I had experience with that. But ra, where you even just like doing tap tap, it was physically impossible for me. I couldn't do it even the tiniest little bit. Okay. And it took me 6 months of daily practice, not knowing what I was doing. Okay. Because I didn't know what I was doing when I was learning Spanish, when I was teaching myself. Um, and it took me 6 months of daily practice just trying to play with the sound, trying to get the sound. And I got to the point where I can produce it. I can do it. I didn't master it because I didn't take that extra time. Like once I was able to kind of do it, I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on some other stuff now that I can kind of do this a bit. Um, but it is possible. So some things just take time. Okay, don't give up. Um, David says, wait, why syllable do you? Yeah, okay, what? Yeah, why? Because that's what that means. Okay, that's a weird one. I don't know if you're on your phone. Maybe it was an autocorrect. So what syllable do you stress in Wolverine and Jubilee? The first or the last? Good question. So for me, Wolverine. If you say Wolverine, it sounds just fine as well. If you say Jubilee, Jubilee, these two words, it doesn't matter which one the primary stress is. They both work just fine. Yeah, there are some words that do that. I think we had another word like that a few weeks ago in the live stream. I don't know if it was you who asked me, but somebody asked me about a word, and oh yeah, I think it was cigarette or something like that. I don't remember, but yeah, there are some words that have more than one stress, and the primary stress actually doesn't matter which one. Don't give it to the middle one, of course. It's not Wolverine or Jubilee. That's definitely wrong. um, so the more you know. Okay. People are talking. Unknown, I'm not saying it like D as in dentist. Okay, that's good. But like my tongue is doing something between TH and the D in dentist. Would you say that your tongue, like you're kind of doing like a D sound, but your tongue is more or less flat on your teeth, like you're actually touching your teeth with your tongue? Let me know, and we'll come back to that. So, Sedent, that person might have been like me with a sound. Yeah. um, Kind of, sorta. But essentially, yes. Um, this person was a Russian speaker, and I don't think there's a schwa in Russian. I could be wrong. They actually have quite a few vowel sounds, but um, in your case, Sedent, you actually technically do, according to the IPA symbols at least, you do have the I sound, and you have what I would recognize as an I sound, just a little bit different. So, but those cases can be even more difficult. I think generally it's actually a lot harder to find a sound in a new language that is very similar to a sound you already know, if you want to get it perfectly, because the change in position and how your tongue feels is going to be so small that it's really difficult to find. Where if, say, you don't have the second vowel, but you have e and and the second vowel is between the two, it still might take a lot of time and practice, but it's going to be relatively easier because you just have to sort of figure out what to do with your tongue to get between those two, big points. So there's all kinds of little factors that can make things easier or more difficult. Okay, Shun, do you think the E sound in English is the same as the E sound in Spanish? Very excellent question. Sorry, I'm still learning and I hear the same sound. Also, I look soy the Spanish vowel chart. Wait, one. And it seems to be the same. Looks. I think there's a typo. Soy. Yes, so the IPA symbol for the E sound in Spanish and English, and in fact in pretty much every language vowel chart that I've looked at, is exactly the same. It's the same IPA symbol. But if you look on the English IPA chart and you look at the Spanish IPA chart, you'll see that the exact position of that symbol is actually in a slightly different spot, and that varies from language to language. Now, according to my ears, what my ears can hear, especially between Spanish and English, which is what I have probably the most experience with, there is a difference. There is a very slight difference in quality. And if you don't hear a difference, that's fine. That is completely 100% fine. In fact, one of the easy things is you might have a very slight accent that maybe nobody would notice, but if you used, say, if you're a Spanish speaker and you use the E sound in Spanish and you never try to use the English version, probably nobody's ever going to notice, as long as everything else is good, because they're that close. But in isolation, I notice a difference. Like if I say there's the English word see, S-E-E or S-E-A, different spelling, different word, same sound. And then there's the Spanish word see as well as the Spanish word see with the accent mark. And these are both pronounced the same as well in Spanish. So the English version would be see, see, see. The Spanish version is more like see, see, see. It's just a little bit farther forward. It's maybe a little bit tighter up in the mouth compared to the English position. And if you're a Spanish speaker, you might not think that it's tighter up in the mouth, but because it's relative to English, in my mouth, it feels a bit tighter. So if you're a Spanish speaker and you're trying to do the English E and make it sound, just minutely better because it's so similar already, part of it is to actually relax the front part of your tongue a little bit. But anyway, very good question. Yes. Usually I don't emphasize the E sound when teaching people because, as I said, they're so similar between English and other languages that even if it gives you a small accent, it's guaranteed that there are other things in pronunciation or other sounds that are causing you much bigger problems. And so you should look at that detail later, if anything. That's one of the last things that you should try to improve, if at all. Okay, so Unknown says pretty much, okay, based on my description, you'll be the judge of it. Okay, yeah, so Unknown was one of the winners for the one-on-one session, so we're going to have our session, I think, next week. So yes, I'll actually be able to give you direct feedback there, but if you're doing it the way that I described, where it's kind of like, it's basically what we call a dental D. Dental is teeth, so the TH sound, the pure clear TH sound is not supposed to touch the teeth. Like the corners of the tip of your tongue can kind of touch right in here. And so there might be a little bit of physical contact, but you're not supposed to be like, solidly here. That's not a TH in English. But as I talked about in the lesson for the TH sound, and as I've mentioned before, because English doesn't have dental T or dental D, what we will very commonly do and never even notice it is we'll do a flat dental T or D, which is where you just do a T or D by putting the front of the tongue flat on these top teeth here on the inside. Like Spanish, the D and T in Spanish is a dental T and D. They don't, well, I guess it depends on who you're talking to and what the dialect is, but like Spanish says, I don't know, what's a word? I can't even think of Spanish words right now. My mind isn't on Spanish. Digo, digo. Okay, it's like it's here. Di. And sometimes even the Spanish D or TH can actually be pronounced so lightly, like where it's just barely making contact, that it actually sounds more like an English TH. Not quite, but it's closer to the English TH. And so, because it's so common for American natives to do a dental T or D instead of an actual proper TH sound, if you just do that, you're going to sound, not only are you going to sound perfectly fine, you're going to sound very natural. But there are some words where we don't do that because it's actually harder. Like in the word other. If you try to say other, it's a lot harder to do because we have to pull straight back into that and so going all the way forward flat is actually more difficult, and we don't want to take that extra time. So we're going to sort of hit that th, maybe even very lightly where we're a little farther back, other, okay, and not like this. So if you try to do a dental D, in that case, it is probably going to sound strange, which is all the more reason to master the sound and be able to do it properly. But that's a small little point, and it might be worth the sacrifice in your case to sound a little bit weird when you're saying other, to be able to just generally say the th in a very natural way. That's a choice you can make. But again, we'll talk about that when we meet in our 30-minute session. Okay, when native speakers encounter words like timber, meringue, or victuals, I don't even know what victual means, whose pronunciation is completely counterintuitive. How do they know the correct pronunciation? I don't know. Did I say it correctly? I guess it depends on who you asked. Who you ask. Unless they heard them first and saw them written later. Unless they heard them first and saw them written later. Unless they heard, I'm going to say it again. Unless they heard them first and saw them written later. Exactly, David. Exactly. Obviously, some very, very uncommon words, especially if they're very fancy or formal, like victuals, tend to be encountered in reading, especially if you read a lot, because they're just not used as much in everyday speech. And so it's possible that somebody will encounter a word in writing without ever having heard it, especially in English where we have so many words. But generally speaking, even if it's once, once or twice, there's very, very, very many words that you almost never hear that in the lifetime of a native speaker over their first, say, 20 years or so, or even especially going through college where you encounter some less frequent words. So say, I don't know, first 25 years or so. There are a lot of words that you're going to hear at least once or twice. So yeah, I mean, it's not always, but most of the time in general for language, we hear the words before we learn how to read. We hear the words before we learn how to write them and how to recognize the characters, the letters. And obviously it's a mix, it's a dynamic mix as you're being educated in the school system as you're growing up. You find some in text and this and that, whatever. But then, of course, you're going to hear somebody say it. Like, what does this word mean? And the teacher says, oh, this word, whatever it is, they say it. And now you know how to pronounce it because you know how the language works. You can just say the word. And then it's a lot easier to remember how to pronounce the word because you already know the pronunciation system. And because you already know how to read generally, you can just say, okay, this particular spelling matches this particular sound, and you just remember that those two go together. Once you have a good basis in how to spell English and the patterns that there are and the exceptions that there are, and of course, a mastery of the sound system, everything else is so much easier. So to your question, What was the question? um, because I see you say when native speakers encounter words like timber, meringue, and victuals, and then you say whose pronunciation is counterintuitive. Oh yeah. Oh, you didn't end. You put a comma instead of the closing bracket. That's so. I was looking for the closing bracket to see the continuation of the question. How do they know the correct pronunciation? Okay, so yeah, I just answered that. Good. Timber, meringue, victuals. Yeah, I don't know. And again, that's why I tell you guys focus on your ears. Focus on your ears. Because if you see words like timber, you might try to say it like timbre or something, or meringue, which I say it meringue. I don't know if somebody else says like meringue or something, but I say meringue like a meringue pie. But that doesn't look at all like how it sounds. It looks like meringue or something like that, or victuals. I don't know that to me that looks pretty much the way that it sounds. Maybe victuals, or something like that. But yeah, it's victuals. Um, okay, anyway, David, also read the Spanish E versus the English one. The only difference I feel is just that English speakers have a tendency to relax as they finish pronouncing the vowel and go from tense to something laxer, whereas native Spanish speakers keep it tense and shorter in isolation. Yes, that valid observation. Kind of like I was saying, it's a little more relaxed. It's not as tight up there. But also, I think the Spanish E is a bit shorter. It's kind of more. What's what I'm looking for? It has like a little punch to it, right? See, right? So it's like, yes, yes, see, right? Where we say, oh, do you see the ball? See. It's like just a little bit. I don't know. It has a little bit of a length. Very small difference in fast speech, but there's, I think, more length to it in English. Shun Shun, thank you very much, everyone, for the information. I never expected those answers. Yeah, well, there you go. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, we say. So, yes, definitely always feel free to ask questions, even if it's a question related to another language. Nothing wrong with that. Of course, preferably a language that I actually know something about, because otherwise I can't answer your question. But Koji Takeda. All right. Koji-san. No, it would be Takeda-san. Yes, because I'm Western. I want to say Koji-san. Maybe Takeda-san. Um, apologies. ちょっと日本語がわかります。um, ちょっと、少し. So yeah, I'm never sure about ちょっと and 少し. That's a stupid point. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. This might be a silly question, but why do so many British singers sound like American? Very good question. I noticed the same thing. I always thought it was so weird, and I asked a while ago. I asked one of my roommates if they ever noticed that, and they're like, "No." I was like, "What do you mean no? Like they sound like they're American." In fact, not only that. Um, so in country music, American country music, where most of the singers they tend to come out of the South, right? And so there's the Southern accent. So country music, American country music, is also very popular in Australia. And there's a singer from Australia who currently lives in the United States, named Keith Urban, and I think he was a host on like America's Got Talent or one of those shows, American Idol, probably. I don't know. So maybe you know him from there, but he's a country singer, and when he speaks, he sounds Australian. When he sings, he sounds like he's from the South. um, or maybe just kind of like he just sounds generally more American. Um, and so I think that's because I don't know the American like going back to the British people sounding more American. Sometimes I notice that they do sound a little more British, but usually I think because the American media is just so big and impactful in the world, um, that and probably partially with just kind of like how English flows in song, um, it's just kind of I don't know. They just kind of their pronunciation changes a little bit. I don't know. Um, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe we just hear it that way, but you're hearing it that way too. So that's interesting. I do notice, interestingly, there are some American speakers who speak American English they're native speakers and everything, but they'll actually, when they're singing, they'll change their R's into more of a British R. Like Hayley Williams of Paramore. I don't know if you know that band, but I was listening to one of some of their songs a little while ago, and I noticed that she was actually using more of like she was saying. I don't remember the word, but let's say it was like more. She was saying like more. Like it was kind of more of a British R sound, and I was like, that's interesting. Like, why is she doing that? So I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. Alejandro, hola. So I'm from Argentina, and sometimes people here pronounces. Oh, okay. So here, HERE. Yes. Okay. I was thinking because we're talking about pronunciation. I thought it was a typo, HEAR. But okay. Some people here pronounce C as in English sink rather than C. It's the same sound. Actually, okay, let's talk about that really quick. But that only happens in our dialect of Spanish. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, who have not seen my lesson about the ing hack um, or the sound, when in Western American English and the way that I speak, ing and ink. So the ing we're going in the back. There's no g, right? NK we're still going in the back, but we're doing a k. Nk. But that vowel, that letter I, in general American that's spoken through the middle of the country, it's the second vowel I, like it. So they'll say ing. So sink, sink. I guess that's how they say it. I don't know. It seems weird to me because I don't say it that way. I say E. That first vowel sounds sink, sink. Um, or with ing, if we say thing, thing. Now, at the end of the day, this is a point that doesn't matter. You can do E or I. Aside from a couple things, watch the ing hack lesson and you'll learn all about that. But in general, it doesn't really matter which vowel you use because in this combination, going from E or I to they sound so similar that nobody really notices the difference. So you're saying that in Argentina, people maybe say it instead of more like si, they say more like si, si, si. Um, and that's okay. I mean, that happens. Which, by the way, I love. I absolutely love the Argentinian accent. It's one of my favorite accents. And I know there's a lot of Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers, who don't like the Argentinian accent, and I don't know why. It sounds so amazing to me. Um, so awesome. But haha, Koji, I've been wondering, or I was wondering, either way, the same. There you go. I've been. Yeah. You could also say I was wondering. In this case, it doesn't matter. David deleted a message again. David, stop deleting your messages every time. Okay. Oh my God, English is such a pain in the neck. I know, right? Literally and figuratively. Literally. I mean, you don't really use your neck to speak English, so maybe your throat. It's a pain in the throat, kind of. But we don't really have any throat sounds. I know I'm being too literal. That's okay. But you said literally, so here we are. Yeah, English can be quite a pain, um, especially with the vowels, and especially if your language only has like 5 vowels. I'm sorry, but it's going to be painful. um, the amount of times I wanted to burn the dictionary. Yeah, I know, right? This is me every day. The correct pronunciations are timbre. Like timbre? Timbre. Really? Or is it timbre? I assume it's supposed to be tam. I've never heard it said timbre. Maybe tambourine, which is spelled Tamberine, tambourine. But Timbre is timber. It's not timbre. Never heard anybody say it that way. And if they say it that way, I guess I can't say they're wrong if they're native, but it's very strange. Meringue. Okay. Now, I guess some people would say meringue because they'll use the a plus ng, which in my dialect, Western American, we change to a usually, meringue. So either way is fine there. And then victuals. Victuals. Hold on. I know I don't like the dictionary for pronunciation information, but this I have to look up this case because middle. Huh. Well, you learn something new every day. Yeah, let's burn the dictionary. I agree. Let's just burn the dictionary. English teacher gives you permission to burn the dictionary. There you go. You heard it here first, folks. Um, Ahmed, I haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see you here. Congrats on 1,000 subs. Thank you very much. We're on our way. Can you slowly pronounce singer and increase? I wonder which I vowel sound you use for these ones because in increase there is NG assimilation, and I want to know if it affects. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about that. That's a very good point. So with singer, oh my god, I need to type singer. So again, you can use E or I, it doesn't particularly matter. I do more of an E sound, but we're going to that and then we don't want to say gur. The hack I gave you was to do a really light gur or really light g all the time, and you'll still sound natural, unless it's just at the end, like walking. You don't want to say g. Anyway, when it connects. But yeah, singer, okay, singer. So that's that the back end sound, I call it. And then in the word increase, so this is a noun and a verb. There's increase and increase. So there's a stress change. Okay, now does that matter? Let's find out. If I say increase, so I can say in plus increase. Okay, I guess I should write it like this, in, to be consistent. Increase, okay, increase. So I can go here and then go to the K. Or I can make it easier. That's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be in because it's in plus crease. That would be like a maybe a more enunciated way to say it, or just a variation, however you want to look at it. But I can do it easier and come back here and just do the back N and open into the because it's right there. Increase, increase. Fine. Now, what about the other stress pattern? So if we say increase, 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 same idea, same idea. Now, because the stress is on the second syllable in the increase in the noun, need to increase it. Yeah, in the noun form, it's probably more likely that we're going to go into the sound because that's where the stress is, and it's easier just to go k, right? And so it's almost like it's increase. It's a weird sort of where almost like it moves over into that second syllable. But in the case of the verb, it's maybe a little, I don't want to say more likely, but it's maybe a little more likely in a way that we're going to keep the regular N because it's increase, increase. So we'll hit the N and then say crease as like almost like a separate thing. But again, in both cases, you can use a regular N, you can use the back N. It does not matter. They are both valid pronunciations for both the verb and the noun. So, oh yeah, never mind. I'm talking about the so you wonder which I vowel. Yeah, so the preceding I sound. Well, I just said it a million times. So let's see, singer. I pronounce it more of an E because that's just how I speak. If it comes out as an I, singer, I probably say it that way sometimes and I don't notice it, but I would identify it as an E, the first vowel sound. Where increase, I would never say increase. Like it's never E. That would sound very, very strange to me. So that would be the second vowel, I. Okay, so two completely separate vowels. Or it could be the same if you say singer with the second vowel also. I mean, it doesn't matter. Okay. Shun Shun is laughing, probably at the conversation between Unknown and David and the burning of the dictionary. I mean, it does hurt my neck when I try to make sounds that I don't usually do. I guess. I mean, all kinds of weird things can happen. I mean, maybe that's part of your problem. Like if you're just like that might be part of the reason why it's difficult to say some sounds. I don't know. Okay, timbre is timbre, but timbre, as in the quality of a particular voice, is supposed to be timbre. No, no, it's not. Timber, Timber, is timber, as in you knock down a tree, and as it's falling, you yell timber so people get out of the way. Um, but timbre, Timbre, which is the quality of a particular voice, it's a musical term. Well, musical or physics term, I guess, science term, is not supposed to be timbre, at least not how I've ever heard it be pronounced. Maybe that's one of the random small differences in middle of the country General American, which is what I'm calling it now since Western American is under the same umbrella of General American. So there's Western General American and Middle General American. That's what we're going to say. But they're basically the same thing. Um, again, I've never heard anybody say timbre. Never, ever, 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 ever. It's extremely strange. I would expect maybe it's a British thing, but if Americans say it, I would be shocked. Like I wouldn't even know what they were saying without enough context. Anyway, okay, so unknown. Josh, I'm hearing natives pronouncing a real g in ing in podcasts, but not like with a g like sound. Why is that? I'm not sure what you mean. Can you elaborate and give me maybe some examples of some specific words? Because that needs further investigating. Maximiliano, hello, hello. I'm a Spanish speaker. Pues hola. Bienvenidos. I'm usually corrected when I pronounce the sound th in words like the or this. Do we normally pronounce it too strongly? The Spanish accent. I guess that might also depend on where you're from specifically. But in general, especially if you're from Spain or not. And I think you might have told me where you're from in the email. I had a bunch of people say I'm from here, I'm from there, and so I don't remember where everybody said they were from. But so in Spain Spanish, there is a voiceless th sound, which is technically it's slightly different than the English th sound, but it sounds pretty much the same. It's kind of like the e and e. But Spain Spanish does not have, or Castilian does not have a voiced th sound, as far as I know. Of course, in Latin America, I don't know, every dialect or whatever, but as general rule, what I learned is that in general in Latin America, you do not use the th sound. So wherever like the z that would be a th or the c that would be a th gets changed into an s sound. And that's generally how I speak. I don't speak with the Castilian th, although I like to because it's very interesting sounding. Mi corazón. Ay, mi corazón. Anyway, so the advice that I give to Spanish speakers, if they have any issues with the th, I give two big pieces of advice. Number one is if you are a Spaniard, just do the th that you would normally do, which for in your mind would be like a z or a c, but in English we call it the th sound. So just change the way you think about it, but do that same sound, right? And then if it needs to be voiced, just go into the same position and get used to adding voice to it. Okay. You might have to make some little tweaks to the exact position and quality of it, but it'll be pretty close. Now, if you're not a Spaniard, I know, and I know many people from Latin America. They don't like Spaniards because of the history and this and that, whatever. And I know it's a complicated thing. So maybe some people won't like this advice, but I do know that many people in Latin America, like they know what a Spanish, like, or I don't want to say Spanish accent, a Castilian accent sounds like, and they can probably, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but they can probably mimic that, like saying corazón instead of corazón, right? And maybe they don't know how to do it perfectly, but if you can mimic that Castilian sound like really well, then you're basically doing an English voiceless th. So that could be sort of your backdoor entry, right? Your little hack into the English sound. And if you can't do it that way, then you just have to start from ground zero, start from scratch, either way. And you might as well just focus on English and not trying to do it through the Castilian accent. So that's the first point that I give is you can, for the nice clear proper th sound, try to base it off of like a Castilian accent th sound, like a th, or I guess a z sound, th, right? Um, However, as I've mentioned a few times, and as I talk about in the main lesson for the th sound, Americans will very, not all the time, but very commonly do a dental D or a dental T for the th sound. Dental T if it's a voiceless th, dental D if it's a voiced th. So instead of saying the or this, we'll say the and this. Now, all you have to do that is use your natural native Spanish D sound, where you touch the teeth, the, like digo, or me dices, right? Me di. That's like a light dental T. And maybe I'm doing that kind of weird. I don't know. I'm not a native speaker. But I've heard many times that's dental Spanish D. Sometimes it doesn't always touch and it's kind of light. And in that case, you're sort of halfway between a dental D and a TH sound in English. So like if I say, I don't know, me dices algo, di. That's kind of a TH sound. It's not exactly the same quality as English, and so you might have to address that. But if you do that type of sound, it's going to sound pretty good. So when you ask, you said people often correct you, and you're asking if normally Spanish speakers pronounce it too strongly. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by too strongly. Like, you mean like you're saying this, like there's too much force? Or if you could elaborate on that, maybe I can better address that. But um, aside from that, that would be the information I give you. So a lot of the time, you can just use your native dental T or D, and it will sound extremely natural. Again, not always. Like in words like other, it's going to sound a little weird if you do that. So be careful, but usually it doesn't matter. Okay, Amit. And also the vowel in bang is more of an more than a for me. Is that correct? Okay, so that's a good question. So with bang, um, bang. I guess, yeah. So the way that I think of it, that by default, how I would identify the sound, would be with the a diphthong. That's how I would describe it. But if we zoom in a bit, bang, bang, you can do just the first part of the diphthong. You don't have to say the full a. You don't have to say bang. That would be like a very clearly enunciated way to say it. But if you say bang, where it's almost like an a, like the third vowel, so it's just like the start of the diphthong, that also sounds just fine. It just sounds like a slightly, it's part of the range of the sound. So there's no problem with that. And then you also say, no, it's definitely timbre. There's a scene about how it's pronounced on Seinfeld. People mix it with timbre a lot. Well, if it came from Seinfeld, I mean, because so I know I didn't watch Seinfeld when it was airing because that was like mostly through the 90s, maybe early 2000s. I don't know. I was a kid, but I have seen, like, my roommate likes to watch old episodes of Seinfeld, and I've seen quite a few episodes. Obviously, there's some like New York accents. There's like some weird things going on there, and I know they talk about interesting things like that. Um, so maybe it's a middle of the country general American English thing. Maybe it's a East Coast or Northeastern thing. I don't know. But all I know is that the way that I say it as a native speaker of Western American English, I say timber. So never would I say timbre, which means that both are correct. Both are correct. Um, yeah. Okay. Anyway, and even if technically the way I'm saying it is wrong, okay, number one, I'm a native. And I've never heard it pronounced any differently. So, I mean, there's that. Just the fact that I haven't heard it pronounced differently should say something. Um, so, even if it's technically wrong, there's that. But even again, if it is wrong, number one, things change. Sometimes things are just different in different parts of the country. And that doesn't mean that a particular pronunciation is necessarily wrong. Um, in my opinion, even if maybe it's strange to me or it's unusual or I would say it's wrong if somebody asked me, if I know that a native speaker naturally says it that way and there are other native speakers around them that naturally say it that way and it's not just like one random person, um, I consider that to be a correct, valid pronunciation because I'm not going to say a native speaker is wrong because you're a native speaker. If you're a native speaker, you're a native speaker. Okay. Now you might have a particular sound like you're from a particular part of the country or whatever, um, which is part of the whole thing. We all have a sound, a particular accent or whatever. But um, if people say timbre, okay, fine, but I don't. um, and then back to unknown, I'm talking about the yeah, that's the IPA symbol, but not like NG. I'm literally hearing G in those podcasts. Maybe it has to do with the state they grew up in. Unknown, there is a YouTuber called Honest, and he very consistently pronounces the G in ing words. So, in my opinion, it's a possibility in some dialects. Just make sure you don't say ink instead of ing. Yeah, yeah. You don't want to accidentally say a K when there's not supposed to be a K there because the K is added. But let's see. So when you say, okay, so we're talking about the sound, the back end. You say, but not like ng. So you mean like not like front end, like ng, like you're hearing g, where they say the but then they release a g after it. Is that what we're talking about? Or is it j? I assume it's g because usually that's the question, but sometimes g is j, like a literal G. Like like they'll say walking G. That's the name of the letter. See, when you tell an English speaker it's a G sound, that could be G or J. So I'm assuming it's G because that's right near the sound. But we have to clarify because I need to make sure I'm on the same page here. um, yes, English is a mess. G as in okay, so as in the ing, so the where there might be a little bit of a g sound. Okay, talking, yeah. Okay, uh, I'll come back to Ahmet there since I'm in the middle of this one. I think I might have briefly mentioned this in either the ing hack or the main lesson. I think it was in the main lesson. Um, so David's probably right. It could be that in some dialects or just from certain speakers, um, maybe they have that good there. In my experience and the way that I speak, um, there's never supposed to be a g that gets released. It's possible that a very tiny accidental little g sound is always possible because of the proximity. Um, but it's not g. That's not the sound. The sound is and then maybe there might be a little bit of a g. Okay. Um, so it's not the g sound. But if some people say talking, even I've heard some people say it that way now that I'm actually really paying attention to this stuff. But in the past, before I was teaching English and stuff, I would never really hear anybody say that unless it was a very intentional accent. Like there's a cartoon, um, some of you may have heard of it called Dexter's Lab, not Dexter Labs. I can't talk and type at the same time. Dexter's Lab, which is short for laboratory. Um, and I grew up watching that pretty much. It was one of the many newer cartoons that I was watching in the 90s. And Dexter has this. I'm not even sure what to call it. Like I guess it's sort of maybe like a bit of like a British Swedish type accent. And he's supposed to be American, but he's supposed to sound smart, right? We usually go towards like more of like a British or somewhere around there type accent when we want to sound smart, like, please, sir, can you please pass the sugar, or some horrible British accent. And when he says, I always notice because it's very exaggerated, right? He says like, I'm talking, I'm talking, and he'll really push out the g at the end. It's very, very noticeable. Um, so who knows? Maybe some people do that. If you hear it, you hear it. I would recommend that you don't do it because there are many cases where um, maybe I don't want to say you'll get into trouble. You're not going to get into trouble, but you might. I don't know. I don't know how other people speak. Like maybe if it's just at the end of words, whereas if like it's singer, like are people saying singer? Like I've never heard that. I don't think singer sounds kind of exaggerated. Like you're really trying to push it out for some reason. Um, so I don't know. I would recommend trying to stay away from that added g, unless it's very small and accidental. But I don't know. You can model it if you want. Um, I guess it exists. Uh, but probably does have to do with where they grew up. Um, I would be like 99% certain about that. Okay, back to Ahmet. Sometimes I hear et pronounced. Wait, okay, I hear et for reduced at, as in at the end of the day, instead of et with the schwa. Can you try saying it that way and tell me if it sounds natural? Okay. Um, well, how would I say this first? At the end of the day. At, at, at the end of the day. At the end of the day. At the end of the day. At the end. At the end of the day. At the end of the. At the end. At the end of the. At, Here's a fun topic. I haven't made a lesson about this yet. So there's eh, eh. Would be the schwa, of course. I is the second vowel, like in. E is the third vowel, like bet. In reality, in the messy reality of English, and this might partially be a little bit of a Western American thing, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Um, the real messy reality of English is that all three of these are commonly used as reduction sounds in more or less the same places. Um, not always, but very, very commonly can be used instead of as a reduction. Um, in fact, more often than not, I've noticed since I've been paying attention to this, I've noticed over the last 6 months to a year or so that where most teachers would say, oh, this reduces to a schwa, not all the time, but in many cases, I will say it either just as like that's the most natural way to say it for me. I reduce it to instead of as a schwa, or both and sound perfectly fine, and it's whichever way it comes out, and it does really doesn't matter, um, because these are really super small reduction sounds, and when we're speaking quickly and you just say a tiny little or a tiny little it, you pretty much don't really hear any difference. There's so small, um, and so it kind of doesn't matter. But directly to your question, when I try to just say at the end of the day, I probably gravitate more towards um, if I really reduce it, I might even hit at the end of the day. At the end of the day, but probably Um, saying it as a schwa, if I really try to say it, not as like a clear, really open schwa like but if I try to say it like an actual reduced sound at the end of the day, at the end of the day, that feels a little bit. I don't want to say odd. It still sounds fine, but it feels almost a little forced. Like I might happen to hit it that way, but I'm probably going to gravitate a little further forward. Um, so it could even be between schwa and third vowel. It really doesn't matter uh, in this case. So yeah, either way would be my answer. um, G as oh wait, we already talked about that. Okay, Maximiliano. I was told that I pronounce the words this and the with the th sound like D and do. Okay, so if I say these words like we pronounce the D in Spanish, dices, digo, I'll be right. Yes, most likely. So one of the students that I have had, he's Spaniard, and I don't know if this is why, um, but him and I were talking a bit about like the D's in Spanish because my impression, what I often hear from Mexican Spanish, um, is that the D is dental. Like it's always dental. It doesn't matter where the D is. It doesn't matter if it's at the stress syllable, not stress syllable. It doesn't matter. It's going to be here. And sometimes, of course, that's pronounced sort of in a more light way, like the where it's kind of like a th. But according to him, as a Spaniard, he said that there are some words that have a D where they do a dental D, and there's some words that have a D where they do more of an English D. And I think digo might be one, like digo or dices. I'm not completely sure, or de. Um, I really don't remember exactly the examples we were talking about, but um, if your Spanish D is like an English D where it's up here and it's not touching the teeth, then do not do that. Okay. That is the one thing that you want to avoid when you're doing the TH sound. We do not say d or t. That will sound uneducated. There's nothing technically wrong with it. A lot of people who, they do hip hop, they do rap, they do things like that. That's part of their natural way that they speak. And I don't want to push that down and say, oh, it's horrible and it's bad, because that's how they speak. That's fine. It's a variation, it's a dialectical variation, but from to the ears of the average speaker of Western American or General American English, if they hear you saying dis or d or duh, if you reduce the to a d to the, or if it's a voiceless th, instead of saying thing, if you say ting, it's going to sound extremely uneducated. Okay. Um, so if you don't want to sound that way, like if you want to sound like, a lot of people who do hip hop and rap, if you like the way that they sound, you can speak that like that. Know that it's going to sound more informal compared to most other speakers. Um, but if you want to learn that, that's perfectly valid. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going for more of just like a regular American pronunciation, we can do the dental version. So if your Spanish D is a dental D where you touch the teeth, not up here, D, and the T is a dental T where you say th, not t, like in English, then yes, you can do your regular Spanish D and T, and your THs should sound just fine. Maybe there's something about the way you speak in particular, about your particular dialect of Spanish that I don't know. I would to verify, I would have to listen to you and hear you for sure. But in my experience with Spanish and with teaching Spanish speakers, that generally is sort of the shortcut. But again, there are some words where we don't actually do the dental because it's extra work. Like other, we have to pull back into and so we don't go all the way flat. We'll just kind of do a light regular th. So you do ideally need to do the regular th. You should be able to do that. But at the end of the day, if you're like, I'm fine with it, I don't care, then just don't worry so much about it. Just do your Spanish D or Spanish T if it's voiced or voiceless, and it's okay. It's okay. But in most cases, you'll sound very natural if you do that. And you also say, do you think reading out loud in English is okay? So I'm going to come back to that. Unknown, working on it yet. Let's see. So we were talking about the ing pronunciation. I think you mean still, working on it still. Yet and still have a very interesting relationship. They're very similar in meaning, but they're used in different ways. In fact, you can use yet and still in the same sentence. We can talk more about that if you want. But how do you say duh properly? Like that? Duh. This word is interesting. The very plain way to say it is it's a D plus right? The schwa sound. Duh, duh, duh. But we very commonly add, I guess you could call it like a throat trill. So trill, like how you like flap your tongue. We sort of like modulate the voice or undulate. That's a fun word. Undulate the voice. So we don't just say duh. We say like duh, duh, and we'll like we'll change our voice that way. And um, with some words, especially this word in English, that's a way of saying it's a way of implying like, yeah, that's super obvious. Do you think I'm a moron? Right? If you just say duh, it's like it conveys the same basic idea, but it's kind of like no energy to it. It's like, well, yeah, duh. Like, okay, no big deal. Of course I know that. Or if you say duh, it's like, what do you think I'm stupid? So it gives a different feel to it. It emphasizes it also. So technically, there is no proper way to say it. It depends on what you're trying to convey, the way you say it. Now, do you think, Maximiliano asks, do you think reading out loud in English is useful to improve our speaking skills? That's a good question. I get that question from time to time. Um, the 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 short, easy answer is yes. Um, but it's not the most useful thing you could be doing. It will have an impact. Um, but see, what you're doing is, I don't want to make it in any way sense, make it sound like it's bad or that you shouldn't do it. If you're just doing it because you think it'll help improve your speaking skills, I wouldn't. Um, but if you want to incorporate it as part of like your study, like you're studying a particular dialogue or material and you're attacking it from different angles, and that's one of the ways that one of the exercises that you do for that, then it could be a very useful component to an overall approach to certain material. Um, but what you're doing, see, normally when you're speaking, it's like, okay, you have your thoughts and you have to, put them out into proper English grammar and vocabulary, or proper enough to be understood at least. And that's difficult enough in itself. When you're reading, your brain, number one, is focused on your eyes more than your mouth. It's focused on interpreting the script that it sees and making sense of that and what it is that you're reading rather than just having in your head. And so it actually is a lot more work for your brain to everything when you're reading out loud compared to either reading silently or regular speaking. Okay. Now, that's not necessarily bad. But again, what you practice is what improves. Okay. What you practice is what improves. So at the end of the day, I'm using that phrase a lot today now that, now that it's been pointed out. At the end of the day, um, if you spend a lot of time reading out loud, especially if you're doing that instead of practicing speaking, even if it's just speaking with yourself, um, then you're going to get really good, not at speaking, but at reading out loud, because that's what you're practicing. What you practice is what improves. And of course, that will have some impact on your speaking ability. But again, there's much better things that you could be using your time for if you're trying to improve your speaking skills. It's sort of like an indirect way to try to improve your speaking skills that has a smaller impact than just practicing speaking. Plus, when you're reading, right, things usually when things are often written in a slightly different way and a slightly different tone than we speak, at least in English. In addition to that, um, even if you have the proper tone, if you say that out loud and then that transfers into your speaking, which I mean, if you do it a lot, it might, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. But if you start speaking like you're reading all the time and you have that sort of reading intonation, you're going to sound really weird. Like you're literally going to sound like a textbook. um, so again, it can be one tool that you use, but if it's going to be a main activity, I would just not even worry about it. It's not going to give you that much benefit compared to other activities. Now, one thing that reading out loud can be used for is working on your pronunciation. Preferably, you will also have audio with the reading so that you can actually hear, because obviously you want to match what you hear. But having the text that you read from can sort of actually help you, because now you know what all the words are, and you can really sort of focus in with your eyes and your ears to try to match what you're hearing. Um, so if that's your goal, then it's a bit more useful. Yeah. Um, Okay, and Curlin says hi, teacher. Yeah, you said hi a while ago. I want to get to you since you're new here. Thanks for joining us, by the way. You say, how are you doing today? I'm doing okay. Yes. Please make the different between these phrases to me. Okay, so wait. Okay, when you say make, okay, so we're not talking about pronunciation. You talk about like, do you want me to explain the difference in the grammar? Um, I assume that's what that means, because we're talking a lot about pronunciation, but grammar questions are always welcome as well. Just confirm that, and I'll come back to you that it's a grammar difference in grammar question, or difference in meaning question. Uh, okay, unknown. I sometimes moronically, a nice word, moronically write that is. Now I'm saying it moronically because of the habit. Um, Yeah, so writing DAT for that. See, that's again, that's an informal writing. That's based on this sort of more informal, like hip hop rap type pronunciation that some people have. I call it that for lack of a better word, like whatever. But where people say dat, and they'll write it that way, and that has sort of filtered into like general internet texting writing, like where it's informal writing, writing D instead of a TH. So informally, I mean, you can do that. I don't personally, unless I'm like, unless I want it to sound that way. Like I want to say like, oh, that's cool, man, or something like that. Like I want it to sound like I'm trying to say it that way, but it's in writing, so you can't hear me. I might write it with a D. But normally I don't do that, even if it's informal. So, um, but yeah, don't let that trick your brain into pronouncing it that way. You don't want to do that. Sound comes first, right? Amit, for the diphthong in by, I use the cot vowel for the first part of the diphthong. Interesting. And for the diphthong in tower, I gravitate towards using the ash vowel. So you mean like in cat, for the first part of the diphthong. Um, okay, hold on. For the diphthong in by, okay, so I. So that's the I diphthong. Uh-huh. I use the cot vowel. I would not recommend that. Because then you're saying by. Like, that sounds like, I'm sure everybody here in maybe your native language, probably everybody has seen Finding Nemo. Um, and there's a scene towards the end with the seagulls, right? And they make that noise, right? In English, they're supposed to be sounding like they're saying the word mine. I don't know if they changed that in other languages, but so it's like mine, mine, mine. That's what it sounds like. If you say bye, it sounds like you're trying to be one of those seagulls in Finding Nemo. It sounds very, very strange. Or it could just sound like a different accent, like maybe Australian. Like bye. I think that sounds kind of Australian to me. But in American English, that sounds weird. At least in my experience. So the start of the I diphthong, like in the word by, it's not ah, but it's much closer to ah than ah. Um, so I would move that forward. And for the diphthong in tower, so we have the ow diphthong, I gravitate toward using the ash vowel for the first part of the diphthong. Again, I assume that means like the a in cat, because that's the same sound, ah. So it's the fourth vowel on the chart. So yes, so basically by and tower, they actually start in the same spot. They're not going to sound like they start in quite the same spot because they're blended with the next sound, and we immediately leave that initial position to start moving into two different endpoints. And that drastically affects the quality of what you hear. So for tower, gravitating towards the fourth vowel, like an ash, that would be correct. You don't want to say the fourth vowel because it's not tower, not tower. I mean, I guess that's okay, but it sounds like you're really trying to like spit the word out. You're really trying to like overemphasize the word. If you say bye, that definitely doesn't sound good. So try to go for both of those. Try to go a little bit behind the fourth vowel, more like, see it if I isolate it. Tower, tower, okay, ah, ah, ah. Okay. The real difference in the position, the physical position between and the start of these diphthongs is very, very close. They're almost the same position. But the has sort of a different physical dimension to it that gives it the quality of the sound. That's the main difference there. But anyway, so I guess if you kind of try to do like a really flat fourth vowel, like you'll probably sound really, really good as the start of those diphthongs. How are you doing today? Oh, where to cut that? What do you think? Okay, so yeah, that's that. How do you say shush properly? Schwa or hai schwa? Yeah, when I first in my head I said shush, and out of my mouth came shush. Both. They're both proper, both perfectly fine. I think shush, in my experience, is more common, but shush is there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, there's one of my favorite. I guess we're just talking about my childhood. Another cartoon that I watched a lot in the '90s was Ed, Ed, and Eddie, which maybe it's just the nostalgia. But if you like watching cartoons, that's a good show to watch. But one of the characters, he's like really, really stupid, and he sometimes he says like random things, just like really. He's supposed to be kind of like the really funny character. And there's I don't remember what the episode was, but one of the characters was talking to him, and he's like, "Shush." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "Shush, shush." So he actually used both. He said, "Shush, shush," and then he said, "My yeast is rising," out of nowhere. That's what made it funny. But yeah, so either way is fine. But still haven't heard from Curlin. If I don't hear from you soon, I'll just go ahead and talk about the difference in meaning there. But how do you say, oh yeah, this word? The way I like to naturally say this word is niche. No, that's not right. See, okay, hold on. Find a niche. So it's the second vowel like it, plus ch, niche. However, there are people who say niche, some people who say niche, some people who say niche. So it can be an SH or a CH. It could be the first vowel or the second vowel. It does not matter. It does not matter at all. In fact, this is a common question native speakers ask. They're like, is it niche or niche? Or is it niche or niche? So we don't even know. You just pick one. What is the most effective way to get better at pronunciation and fluency? G. Hernandez. Thank you for joining us and entering the chat. Sorry it took a second to get to you, but the most effective way to get better at pronunciation and fluency. I've talked about this a lot. I don't have an official lesson or video about this quite yet. But because I've talked about this a lot, I'm not going to go too in depth. The short answer is shadowing. Shadowing, shadowing, shadowing. Also called mimicking or parroting. And ideally, you want to go and do it in depth in multiple passes where, say, if you have the sentence, I want to go to the beach, you have some audio where first you're just trying to mimic the rhythm and intonation. So you're not even saying the words, right? You hear I want to go to the beach and you try to say or you hum it. Okay? And you really focus on the intonation. It sounds stupid, it feels stupid, but it works. Okay? This is basically what you did as a baby, more or less. Then you go again and you make sure you're hitting all the sounds. Okay, I wanna. Make sure you say I, not. Well, I mean, I might reduce, but say wanna, not like wanna or something like that. And it's wanna if they're actually saying na instead of want to, right? Wanna go. Goda, goda. That T will very commonly turn to a flap D. Goda instead of go to. So it forces you to really pay attention, and everybody is always surprised. Even advanced learners that I've worked with, they're always surprised that when they try to actually go in and do detailed shadowing, there's so many things that they notice that they've never noticed before, even though they're advanced learners. And they start being able to actually start to pinpoint and master the proper sounds and flow. Okay. It just look at it very scientifically, break it down into the different parts, rhythm and intonation and stress, right? The ups and downs and flow, the sounds, basic sounds themselves, making sure you're hitting the right sounds. I have lessons for that. You use vowel charts to help figure out what's going on in your mouth. And then the linking and connections of things that can happen, not always, but that often happen. And you just do a lot of shadowing of many different sentences, pay very close attention, make little changes in your mouth when you need to make a sound better. It's all one big ongoing process. If there's only one thing, like if somebody says, how do I learn a language? Just even a whole language. So we're talking about all areas, reading, writing, speaking, listening, whatever. How do I learn a language? If I could just give you one thing that I would recommend, it's to just focus on pronunciation and ear training through shadowing. That's it. If you do just that one thing, even if you never study grammar, you never learn vocabulary, that one thing can get you all the way to bilingual fluency. That doesn't mean that learning some grammar here and there can be useful, because it can. It can be very useful and help you learn faster. But if I could only give you one thing, that is the single most powerful tool to not only learn a language in general, but especially to master the pronunciation. But you can't just listen and repeat, one time something that you heard someone say. They say like, I want to go to the beach, repeat. And you say, I want to go to the beach. Okay, next sentence. No, that's not shadowing. Okay, you're not going to really learn hardly anything from that. You have to go in scientifically, methodically, with precision, figure out what's going on with your tongue. Are you using the proper intonation and rhythm? Are your ears working right? Do you hear the difference between sounds, right? That's the whole process. But if you do that, you're going to get so much benefit because it impacts pretty much all other areas, even your reading, because when you're reading, you have an accent in your head, right? And the more that you get used to how things actually should sound, and the more you actually focus on how the language does sound, the more that's going to affect how you read. And obviously, if you can speak faster, you can potentially read faster because obviously it's a slightly different skill, but in your head, the words will flow better. So it really does impact everything, even if it doesn't seem like it would impact a particular area. Anyway, that's that's the answer. Thanks for your answers. No problem, Maximiliano. Unknown. Our native languages are same with Amet. Okay, so our. I think you're. I think you're trying to say one sentence in two different ways. I think so. Like you would say, like my native language is the same as Amet. or our native languages are the same, comma, Ahmed, if you're talking directly to him. I assume that's what you're trying to say. Yeah, it definitely has to do with the way we say it a lot. Yeah. Okay, so that's talking about other stuff. Maximiliano also. Oh yes, and hello Enoch. Sorry, trying to answer questions. I just see that you say hi. Don't want to ignore you. Also Viet An Do. I have no idea how to say that. I will get to your question in a quick second. Best way to learn, but thank you for coming. Best way to learn phrasal verbs. Learn the logic of prepositions. Learn the logic of prepositions. I have a book about that, which you know about, and I think you won the free ebooks, so there you go. Logic of prepositions, which I am also making the free course. As I said, it takes me forever to make those videos. I need to make time to sit down and work on those videos because they take me so much time to make. But I do plan to make more videos about that here on the channel for free for you guys based on the book. But when you can feel the prepositions, okay, the verbs are also important, right? Because if you keep the same preposition but you change the verb, you get a different meaning also. But when you can feel the prepositions and how they're connected under the surface in the mind of a native speaker, phrasal verbs are so much easier to learn. They're so much quicker to learn, and you'll start to spontaneously use phrasal verbs. Not always correctly. You will still make some mistakes because there's certain lines that, English just doesn't like. The language is messy. Okay, there is no magic bullet perfect answer, but when you take my approach of using logic to build up the feeling of the core prepositions, phrasal verbs will start to become second nature, and they'll just start to make sense, right? To where when you hear a new phrasal verb, you'll kind of like, sometimes phrasal verbs have different meanings, and I mean that's fine, and that's because of how the verb and the preposition can interact together. It might actually be able to create two different things. It, as I said, it can get a little messy, but generally that's what I recommend doing. Outside of that, if you don't want to go and learn the logic and build the feeling for the prepositions, I really don't know the best way to do that. I mean, do it one at a time. Learn a new phrasal verb every week, or something like, which I mean, that's something else you can also do. But yeah, my way is the hack to get into the personality of the English language. Unknown. Oh, okay, I see. You say are the same. Yeah. Okay, that is an improvement. The same. Niche sounds way cooler though. Well, there you go. Then just say niche. You can say it either way. Are click and click homophones? Yes, they are. Absolutely, 100%. You just have to click the mouse, and then you will be part of this click. Exactly the same. Okay, so Viet An Do. How do you pronounce goods? Is glottal D here? Good question. No. So goods, 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 goods. If it were a glottal D, a glottal stop D, then that would be goods, goods. And we don't say it that way. There's no need to stop to cut off the air here. You go into the D position, like a normal D. Okay, go to the D position, and then the SZ position is pretty much in the same area as T, D, N at the top of the mouth here, not touching the teeth. Except it obviously it doesn't touch. It's kind of like just a little open. It's right in that area. So when you close the D, and then you have it's spelled with an S, right? But that S is changing into a Z sound because of the effect of the D voice. And so what we're going to do is we're going to release that D and just kind of push a Z through the D. Okay. It's like when we say it's, we don't say it's or do a glottal and say it's. We say it's. Now, for the T, it can kind of sound like there's a bit of a stop there, and that's okay, especially if we're saying it really clearly. But if I say it's, you just hear it. Okay, it's like one sound. You're pushing the S. It's like a TS, right, where you're pushing the S through the T. It's exactly the same here, where you're pushing the Z sound through the D. Z, z, z. Goods. Okay. So it kind of just sounds like a Z that is being forced through a small hole. Z, 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 z. Yeah. So it's not a stop in any way, really. If I say it really slowly, good. Technically, there is a held D, which good. I guess I could make it into a glottal D. But that's only if I'm saying it like really slowly, really clearly for some special reason. I don't know why I would do that, but it's possible. In normal speech, at normal speed, there's no stop at all. No hold, no stop. So Enoch says, hi, yes. Unknown. Even I don't know what I was trying to say. Never mind. Okay, this is a valid question. YouTube tried to block this for obvious reasons. Curlin comes back. Curlin, you never clarified your first question. I've been waiting for you to clarify your first question. It's getting dark in here. Let me turn on the light. Okay. Bam. Does that work? Oh, that does work. I don't know, that might be blinding. But here we are. Things. Okay, you're welcome, Viet Ando. Unknown, really quick. Are there really people that say bitch like bish? If it's in a serious way, I would say no. I've never heard anybody say it that way. If you are maybe joking or you're trying to say it in more of like a family-friendly way where it doesn't actually sound as bad because it's a curse word, right? It doesn't feel as bad when you say it. Maybe some people might do that, bish, like bish. But it's just it's a special thing. It's not the normal way to say the word. So if people say it that way, I would be very, very surprised if they're saying it that way seriously. Okay, so Curlin, let me get to Curlin stuff, especially since we don't have anything else now. So first, Curlin, your question about pronunciation for EWE. This is not an English word. So I'm really not sure. I mean, I would say ew, which I mean, we do have. If something is really gross or disgusting, I'd say ew. Okay, we would write that EW. The extra E at the end, I have no idea. Iwi, ewe. It's not an English word. If it's part of another word, then if you give me that word, I can maybe pronounce it. But yeah, EWE by itself, just it doesn't make any sense. Your original question, please make the difference between these two phrases. I saw you make love and I saw you making, which is a very strange thing, but it's basically the difference between the ing and the non-ing. In this sentence, in this context, there's really no difference. Technically, the grammar is different. The ing sounds more like it's something that's in process. That's why it's called the continuous, or in British English, the progressive tense, because there's progress, there's something happening. But in some contexts, the actual difference in meaning that would result is so incredibly small that it really means the same thing. So the answer to your question in this case would be there really is no difference. Yeah. Good. Okay. And we caught up. An hour and a half, and we caught up. And there's David. David has to go. No. Okay, gotta go. I really enjoyed myself as usual. Thank you for all the answers, and good night, everyone, or whatever time of day it is in your neck of the woods. Nice phrase, neck of the woods. Very nice. Okay, well, bye, David. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out, and hope to see you next week as well. Unknown asks, is tantalize a used word in the US? I heard that it's British slang. It very well might be British slang. I don't know if it is. Maybe they have a slang use for it. But it's, at least in American English, it's just a normal word. Like much more commonly, we use the ing form as an adjective when we say something is very tantalizing. Which we use to mean pretty much the same as tempting. Something's very tempting. There's just like a fancier way to say tempting. I have messages. So many things in my YouTube. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we use it, but it's a specific word of a specific use, and it's not really anything special. So okay. Any other questions? Okay, I think I'm already losing my voice today. It's only been an hour and a half. Isn't it like disappointing and tempting? Disappointing and tempting. Well, I mean, tempting for sure, but the disappointing, I don't know. I off the top of my head, I would say no, but let's see what the dictionary says. The dictionary is actually useful for the meaning of words, not so much the pronunciation of words. So let's see here. Tantalizing. Okay. Well, I'm looking up the ing form, but adjective, having or exhibiting something that is very loud. Let me know if that helicopter is too loud. Having or exhibiting something that provokes or arouses expectation, interest, or desire, especially that which remains unobtainable or beyond one's reach. See, this is why you guys end up sending like textbooks, because of how things are explained in the dictionary. There's nothing about disappointment here. Let's see if I go tantalize. Tantalize, verb, used with object. To torment with or as if with the sight of something desired but out of reach. Teased by arousing expectations that are repeatedly disappointed. Okay. Okay. So I would say the use of tantalizing, which is more common, it doesn't say anything about disappointment. Maybe because it says especially something that is unobtainable. It's outside of your reach. You can't have it, right? There could be a feeling of disappointment with that, and that makes sense. But tantalize itself as a verb, it tantalizes me. I think maybe that might have a little more of the feeling of disappointment compared to tantalizing. That's good. Good insight. So there you go. Technically, I guess you're right. Yeah, it's like disappointing and tempting, but really emphasis on the tempting. Like the tempting is the main part. The disappointing is secondary, I would say. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? If not, it's fine. But I am. Oh, we're down to 4 people. Guess not. I am in the middle of making the. Oh, you're welcome. Glad I explained well. Yeah, half the time when I'm explaining something, I'm just like, I really don't think I'm doing a good job of explaining this, and then people are like, "You explained that really well," and I was like, "Oh, okay, works out." But I think it's because as I'm trying to explain something, I'm usually like fighting with my brain, like I'm fighting with myself in my brain, especially because sometimes my brain wants to go on a tangent, and I have to keep it on track, and so it's just like this really weird thing, and it comes out making sense. So I guess that works, but that's my brain. So I'm in the middle, before I started the live stream, I was in the middle of editing the video, the next lesson, for the truth about the schwa sound. So stay tuned for that. If I can finish that tonight, which I actually might be able to, then I will post it on Patreon tonight because they have early access. And then I will release that tomorrow morning. If I don't get it done until tomorrow sometime, then I'll post it in Patreon for a few hours and release it to you by tomorrow night. But that's going to be the next lesson because that was the result of the poll that I did. You guys want to hear about the schwa sound, so. But there will be more lessons coming about many different things, especially more extra practice lessons. So, anyway, yeah, I don't know. Well, we're heading towards 2 hours. It's been an hour and 45 minutes. It's a little shorter than usual if we end here, but if nobody has any questions, I don't really know what else to talk about at this point, except for the cat, which you can see. How can you tell the difference between voice and voiceless? Good question. Good question. Sometimes, depending on sounds around certain sounds, it can be a little difficult to tell, but I should probably sleep too since it's about 5 a.m. Good night, y'all. Well, good night. Remember, we have to arrange the details. I don't think we decided on an exact time for the one-on-one session that you won. So, I don't know. We need to work that out. But yes, thank you for coming. See you next time or whatever. So tell the difference between voice and voiceless. Well, so voiceless, as we know, is where there's no vibration, right? There's no actual sound. We're just using air, right? And depending on what you're doing with your tongue and your mouth, you're going to produce a different sound, like a t when you go here, but there's no voice, right? T, t, t. Or if it's an S, you're here, you're not actually touching. S, you get a completely different sound, but it's still just air. Okay. And I'm pretty sure all languages have voice and voiceless sounds. So that should be fairly easy. But there are some sounds in a new language that maybe are a little different than your native language or completely new. And those are the ones that could be hard to hear the difference, like especially between F and V, because some languages don't have one of those, or between the voiced and voiceless TH sound. Sometimes English learners have difficulty with that. In this case, we're talking about as if there were a T in goods instead of a D. For this particular example, what's going to happen, if it were a T, you're going to hear tss. So you're going to hear an S, which is voiceless, being pushed through the T, instead of a Z, which is voiced, being pushed through the D, which is also voiced, right? Guts, guts. Now, because the all vowels are voiced, right? Because the is voiced, that goes all the way up to the point where we close the T. And so it can kind of maybe sound a little bit like a D. And that's where you might have some difficulty. But it's a subtle thing. It's something you might have to train your ear for. This particular example is so extremely specific, I wouldn't worry about training with this pair. But in general, like if you have difficulty between ts and z, then that might be something to focus on with your ears, and maybe try to find some minimal pairs to do that with. But that's not usually a common problem for a lot of learners. Another thing to keep in mind, okay, well, actually, going back to the basics, let's say, for example, if you can't hear the difference between F and V, like they sound the same to you. You really want to focus on not on hearing the position because you might be focusing more on the position, right? Like let's say, what is it? So Japanese does not have a V sound, right? They don't have V. They do have an F sound technically. It's like a very light version of the English F. It's like h, h, and it's only when followed by u. So they say ha, he, hu, he, ho. Otherwise, it's an H sound. So they kind of don't really have an F, but technically they do. But we'll use this as an example. So because Japanese doesn't have a V sound, right? They might be able to do f pretty easily, right? But then they try to do v, or they try to hear v, and they don't really hear v. Maybe they're hearing the position of f, right? So instead of saying very, they end up saying fairy, fairy. What you want to do is you really want to try to focus in on, are you hearing breath for that sound? Not immediately before it, not immediately after it, but for that particular sound. Are you hearing breath, like air, or are you actually hearing the vibration? Okay. Is it, right? That's just air. Or is it, see, because when we vibrate, we're not really going to hear the air. It sort of replaces that puff of air sound with the vibration. Okay. And so you can go and apply that to any pair you need. So if it's guts and goods, guts, goods, guts, goods. Okay, we're trying to focus on, is it more, is it air, or is it zzz, where we actually hear that vibration? Okay, um, that's what I would say. Um, I will note, however, and I mentioned this before, one thing that very commonly happens, like goods is spelled with an S, but it's pronounced with a Z, right? Not always, not always, but in many cases, when there is an S at the end of a word, if the previous sound is a consonant sound, and if it's a voiced consonant sound, what will commonly happen in many words is that the voiced quality of that consonant sound will change, it sort of changes that S ending into a Z sound. So we still read it with an S, but it gets pronounced as a Z. Okay, so goods. Again, that doesn't happen with all words. There are exceptions to that, but it is a common thing that happens. So you can kind of look out for that as well. Okay, Maximiliano, short. Okay, so when you put this short, so I assume that's the short I. It's very detailed. Thank you so much. No problem. Glad I could help. Sometimes I think I'm a little too detailed, but if it helps, then there we go. Good. So Maximiliano, so you're saying the short I, or is it L? Because it looks like an L. You can never tell. I assume it's an I because there is no short L. But you say equal, like, and E in Spanish. So the E in Spanish is eh. It's actually the IPA symbol. It's not exactly the same position, but the IPA symbol for the Spanish eh sound is the exact same symbol that we use at the start of the diphthong A. Okay, which is very, very close to the third vowel in English, eh. That sounds almost exactly the same. It's a little more closed, and the shape is a little bit different. To make things simple, the short I, which I hate that term, and I'm going to tell you why, but the short I in English is eh, eh. Okay, this is a common problem for Spanish speakers because Spanish has e, a. okay? And then ou. So you have those, well, the A is kind of down more in the bottom middle, but the E and E are like your two front vowel sounds, right? Where English has E, A. So we have four where you only have two. This short I sound, the like in it, in, this sound does not exist in Spanish. If your ears are good enough, which they might be if you have a bit of a talent. If you don't, it's okay. But if your ears are good enough, there's a chance that you may have noticed other Spanish speakers sometimes, instead of saying E, especially if it's an unstressed word, like say sin, right? Where they actually say more like sin instead of seen. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. I've noticed that because I can hear both. But sin, this word in English, sin, is actually pronounced sin, not e, not e. And this means pecado in English, pecado. So, a Spanish speaker sees this word and they're going to try to say it like in, right? Like it's in the box, in the box, something like that, right? Um, and that's not right. It's not e, but it's also not It's not en the box. No, okay, it's in, and you might not be able to hear that. If you can't, I have minimal pairs. If you've done those and you need more practice, then hopefully sometime in the near future I will be able to make my ear trainer software. I'm still trying to get my channel monetized first. Um, so more help is on the way. But no, the in Spanish is not the same as the short I. Now, I hate the term short I, especially if your native language has a different rhythm pattern. English is what's called a stress timed language. Spanish is what is called a syllable timed language. Now, this makes a very, very big difference. In Spanish, yes, you have stress, right? You have certain syllables and you have an accent mark where you can mark the stress where it's not normally supposed to be. That's fine. So you have a stress system in Spanish. But in Spanish, whether it's stressed or not, each syllable is approximately the same length. Okay. Um, and approximately the same volume, more or less, right? So it's syllable timed. Each syllable is sort of a more or less equal piece as you flow through the language. And then if it's stressed, right, you kind of just go a bit louder, maybe a little bit longer, but that's it. Where English is stress timed, and so we're constantly going from louder and longer, shorter and quieter, louder and longer, shorter and quieter. And the language generally, it's not always one to one, but the language generally does this: up and down and up and down and up and down. Notice I'm saying up and down and up and down and up and down. Okay, exactly like that. It's not up and down and up and down. You sound like a robot. Okay. Um, Now, what does this have to do with short I? I have a whole lesson about this where I talk about why I want you to forget the terms short and long I or short and long whatever, long A, short A, um, because I think, in my experience, it's very confusing and misleading to English learners because this sound okay, like in or it's called short compared to I. Okay. In English, the sound I, which is the diphthong, I, that's called the long I. And we call it the long I because it's a diphthong, it's longer technically. And we call this other I the short I because the name of that letter is I. But the sound that it produces is I. which compared to the diphthong I, which a diphthong is two sounds put together, it is technically kind of shorter. But many English learners hear short I and they think that this sound is never stressed because it's short, right? And that is absolutely 100% not true. Not true. So if I say, now the preposition in, usually not stressed, it's a preposition. Okay, that doesn't matter. That's fine. So it's just short. In, in. It may even reduce to a schwa, and, possibly. Or it. Sometimes we even drop the I sound at the start of it, and we just say the T. Like if I say it's time, I might just say it's time. It's time. Just start from that T pushing out the S. That's something that we do sometimes. So that I could be so small that it just disappears. But that's in an unstressed syllable. Okay? That's just part of the natural flow of the language, whether it's a long vowel or a short vowel. If I say, for example, hit, okay, this is a verb, hit. It's exactly the same sound as in and it, right? It, hit, it, hit. Now there's an H in front of it. That's the only difference. But this word is stressed because it's a verb or a noun. And so it's louder and longer. So this sound, I, this vowel sound, is now being pronounced louder and longer compared to the unstressed, shorter and quieter sound in it or in. So I know this wasn't your question, and it's extra information, but I always want to address this whenever I can. I do not use the term short I. Sometimes you might hear me use it if somebody else references it, but I try not to use short I, long I, whatever. The short I is a monophthong, okay, meaning an individual vowel sound, where the long I is a diphthong. So I call it the diphthong I because that's what it is. That can also be shorter if it's in an unstressed syllable, like the word I. If I say I like it, that can actually reduce more to like I like it. It's actually kind of sort of like a schwa sound in a way. But I don't have to say I like it. I can say I like it. I like it. Nice and short, nice and small, quiet, because it's not a stressed syllable. Or if I say pie or mine, well, mine, yeah, I mean, we can always give intentional stress for a particular reason, but that word I think by default is not stressed. But yeah, pie or sky, high, right? It's going to be louder and longer, and that's louder and longer relative to the unstressed syllable version of the same sound. So all vowel sounds, whether they're long or short, whether they're monophthongs or diphthongs, have a louder, longer version and a shorter, quieter version. And technically that includes the schwa, but that's a different topic, which I'll be addressing in my most recent lesson that I'm about to release tonight or tomorrow. But anyway, then there are, of course, reduction sounds. And when we have a sound that is being used as a reduction, that is a special case. Okay, that is a special case that where we're actually changing from one sound to another sound for a special reason. And that's not just the schwa. That's also, say, The word or is 9 times out of 10 pronounced not or, It reduces to so that is a special use of the vowel. Okay. But aside from that, yeah. So there's that. Any other questions? We're at over 2 hours now. And we lost most of our audience. But that's okay. Any other questions? Give it a couple minutes here. Thank you. No problem. No problem. I hope that made sense. Sometimes I ramble. But especially if it's something that I think is really important and that really bothers me about the way that things are normally taught. Um, I can really get like just like go on and on about it because it bothers me so much. Um, and that's just the thing is a lot of the times, when other teachers are teaching you this or that, like short vowel, long vowel, it's not that they're wrong. I mean, linguistically, yes, technically there's short and long vowels, but in English, because English is a stress time language, it's a confusing and misleading concept that's why I use the numbers, right? The diphthongs are diphthongs, but I say second vowel on the vowel chart because I go in a particular order on the vowel chart. So it's e, a. Um, and I think that's a much better way to refer to them based on their position in the vowel chart instead of long, short, or IPA, because the IPA also has problems. But now I know why you don't like it. It is confusing. You're right. Well, good. Thank you very much. Validation. Yay. So glad you agree. But yeah, especially for if you're coming from a language that's syllable stressed, right? And then you have this teacher who, is very well intentioned and technically correct, telling you that we have long vowels and short vowels. And from your perspective and your experience with your language, you don't know that much, if anything, about a stress time language and how that rhythm works. It's a completely unknown new thing to you. And then you hear about short vowels and long vowels. What are you going to think? You're going to think that the short vowels are not stressed. Like, it's just a logical conclusion. Um, so, yeah. Now, if you were a Russian speaker, because Russian or German speaker, German and Russian are stress timed like English. Um, I still think it's misleading and confusing, but I think that it wouldn't necessarily cause as much of a problem because in my experience teaching mostly Russians, a couple Germans, they can pick up the rhythm and stress of English a lot more easily because it's similar to their language. And so they're kind of used to going louder and longer, shorter and quieter, louder and longer, shorter and quieter. And so when they hear something like the short I, they might think that it's never stressed, but at least they have a chance, like a reference from their language to say like, oh, hey, like, yeah, we have the same sound that could be loud and long or quiet and short. Is it the same in English? Where coming from a syllable time language, um, or a language like Japanese, which is a pitch accent, which is completely different than both syllable time and stress time, um, you don't have a chance. Like you're just not being given the proper information to start with to be able to realize that unless you have really good ears naturally and you actually pay attention and you start to notice, hey, sometimes it is shorter and sometimes it is longer. Um, so yeah, there are so many things that I would change about the way that English is taught in schools around the world. To my understanding, half the world is still learning British English, which is okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with British English. British English is cool. I like it. Um, but I mean, I guess my experience is biased because I'm an American speaker, but a lot of the students that I've had in the past, they tell me that they were taught British English. They wanted to learn American English, or now they would prefer to learn American English. But British English is what they teach in the schools. And there's this perception in the world that, well, not everywhere, but there's this perception that British English is like the proper English. And even some British people have that perception. It's the Queen's English, right? Historically, technically, yes, that's true, but that doesn't make American English or Australian English or South African English or even Indian English. It doesn't make these different dialects invalid. They're still perfectly valid, correct forms of English, just relatively speaking. And American English is like 98% the same as British English in terms of how we use the grammar and most of the words. So there's not a whole lot of differences anyway. But um, there are some key differences between British and American grammar and British and American pronunciation, obviously, that will either make you sound more British or make you sound more American. It's just how it is. So if you want to learn American English, but your school is teaching you British English because it's the proper, correct English, you know, good thing we have the internet. In fact, you can learn a lot faster and a lot better by yourself if you have an idea of what you're doing compared to in a traditional class, because we have the internet. So anyway, I'm just kind of rambling on here. Any other questions today? It's already 6:10 here. The sun has gone down. I think I need to get back to editing that video. And I have a few other things to do today too. It's a very busy day. So, unless anybody has any last minute questions, I think I'm going to go. So, thank you all very, very much for attending another live stream. And keep your eyes out for the next lesson that is going to be posted again. Well, for you guys, if you're not on Patreon, you'll get it. Should be tomorrow, maybe tomorrow morning or tomorrow night, probably tomorrow night. So there you go. And come back next week and I will answer more questions. So thank you all very much. Have a good weekend.